Say it again.
Okay. Katie, Ann,
You're live.
good
Yes.
afternoon.
Hi.
There you are. Welcome to Senate Education,
Thank you.
Friday, February 9th, and we're going to start by returning to S-171, an act relating to legal residency of a student following displacement by a natural disaster. It's in our folders, and we asked the two of you to come in. Actually, we're going to start with you, Katie, for your testimony and your thoughts. You want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks. For the record, I'm Katie Preston, State Coordinator for the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program at the Agency of Education.
And just so you know, Katie, we had a walkthrough with Ledge Council and the bill sponsor, Senator Ron Hinsdale, last week. And so any advice or comments or concerns would be appreciated.
Okay, sure. I did prepare some slides just to kind of walk through the McKinney-Vento Act, which is the federal law that I oversee implementation of at the agency. I think maybe it would be helpful to start there, just as sort of a.
Or do you mind throwing them up?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Should I also share my screen, or is that not necessary?
Whatever works best for Morgan.
Probably easier for you to share your screen, Katie.
Okay.
That's okay.
It looks like I don't have permission.
One moment. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
There you go.
Okay. And you can all see the slides?
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful.
We've dedicated about a half hour to this, just so you know.
Okay.
Both of you testify.
Wonderful. Yeah, so like I said, I'll just kind of give a pretty high level overview of the McKinney-Vento Act, which is the federal law for students who are experiencing homelessness and their educational rights. So just to kind of ground us in that first, the education definition, or the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless, is those children or youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And then gives several examples of what that might look like in statute. So including those children and youth who are sharing housing, sometimes referred to as doubled up or couch surfing. So this would be situations where a family's been evicted, a foreclosure, their house has burned down, a flood, something of that nature, where they've lost housing and they are now sharing housing with another individual as a result of that. Those individuals who are living in hotels, motels, camping grounds, emergency shelters, transitional shelters, public places that are not designed for or used as sleeping accommodations, cars, parks, public spaces, abandoned buildings, and migratory children living in the above circumstances as well. One piece of the definition that I wanted to draw attention to in particular for this conversation is around substandard housing or inadequate housing. That includes things like a house that is contaminated with mold, a house that does not have heat or running water, a house that would be deemed inhabitable. So when we're thinking about things like natural disasters, and I think in particular with flooding, we're likely going to see an increase in the number of families who are living in substandard housing, who maybe lost their heating source and, potentially due to supply chain issues, haven't been able to get a new one, or their house is full of mold now and they haven't, been able, they're still living there and haven't been able to remediate that. So just wanted to kind of draw attention to that piece. And then I like to just put this graphic up because I think it helps show just how much more expansive the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless is than HUD. So again, all of those categories across the top there: unsheltered, in shelter, hotels, motels, and doubled up or sharing housing due to loss of housing would all be eligible for McKinney-Vento supports, which may or may not be the case for under the HUD definition of homeless. Okay. So students who have been determined to meet the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless will have rights under the McKinney-Vento Act. And I've sort of listed out, again, very, very high level, what some of those rights and entitlements would be. So of course, equal access to FAPE, including public preschool, immediate enrollment, even if they don't have all the necessary paperwork. So potentially they don't have their immunization, proof of immunization or something like that. That would not be a barrier to enrollment for a student who's experiencing homelessness. Remaining in the school of origin if it's determined to be in their best interest in order to maintain educational stability, access to all educational and related services for which they're eligible, full participation in school, which includes extracurricular activities. And then if it's determined to be in the student's best interest to stay in their school of origin, transportation is also provided by the LEA if that's necessary.
So Kate, I'm gonna interrupt you just so I should ask you to preface your comments with, do you support Senator Ram-Hinsdale's bill? Do you feel like, is it covered in, like, what direction are you sort of heading in? That it's not needed?
Sorry, what was that?
I'll let you, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's well-intentioned. I think that we're gonna find a lot of these students are covered under McKinney-Vento. Yeah. Like, if you look at that definition, a lot of them will be, but not all of them. And so I think some of the questions that I have are, it feels really down in the weeds, but what do we mean by displaced? Like if a student, let's say they are evacuated due to a flood, an impending flood, they have had to leave their home. And let's say they, rather than returning to their home, they say, we don't want the potential for more future flooding to impact our housing. We're just gonna leave that home. We're gonna go and rent somewhere else. And they have the resources and ability to do so. We would not necessarily consider that a homeless situation. So there are
a question. Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Katie. I was just wondering, is there a definition of displaced already in Vermont statute?
Not that I'm aware of.
Can I just jump in for a second here? Sorry, for the record, it's Ann Bordenero, Division Director for Federal Programs at the Agency of Education. Katie and I have thoughts about this bill, which we've coordinated with the Secretary and others. So in general, we agree that it's well-intentioned. I think what we're concerned about here is that some of the boundaries of the bill are not clearly defined.
Okay.
So for example, transportation is the major cost that school districts encounter under McKinney-Vento when a child is deemed homeless under this law. So is this law going to grant an entitlement to transportation for a child who does not qualify for McKinney-Vento, like the example that Katie just gave, who's displaced, and then the parents decide they want to stay in this new place? They don't meet McKinney-Vento definition of homeless, but does that mean that they can, be transported back to the school of origin? And if so, that potentially could be an unfunded mandate. I mean, who's going to pay for that? That isn't specified. The other thing that isn't specified is duration. So, is this something where they've moved to a new apartment, whether or not they intend to return to their original home that is damaged or whatever? Does that go on for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years? Like, again, it isn't clear. And displaced, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, displaced isn't really a term in McKinney-Vento. We're not really familiar with state law. So I don't think either of us can speak definitively to whether there's such a term in state law, but it did appear that this law was being built on language in the federal law in terms of like school of origin. And so many of the children who are displaced for natural disaster reasons will be covered and will have entitlement to these services. But not all, as Katie said. And so the question is, with the not all, what comes with having a right under state law to stay at your school of origin? That's I think where our concerns are, is the vagueness of what does it mean to be displaced but not necessarily homeless?
Mhm.
And what does it mean in terms of responsibilities of the new school district where the family is living, in terms of, if the child's able to stay at the school of origin, what does that mean for the new school district and for how long, and what are they responsible for providing? And those are some of our concerns.
Yeah, so I would just echo that. The transportation is a concern, and I'll just skip forward to this slide here around, as Anne said, the duration of rights. This is something that's written right into the McKinney-Vento Act, and it's quite clear that a student has rights to the entitlements under McKinney-Vento for as long as they are homeless and until the end of the academic year in which they become permanently housed. So it really does put some guardrails around the rights to school of origin, the rights to transportation to school of origin. In the case that a student does become permanently housed in the middle of the school year, they can finish out the school year at their school of origin, and then come next school year, they would be expected to enroll in their local school. So again, just sort of those guardrails around the length of time. The last thing I just wanted to briefly share was this is our national data for the last 20 years, and obviously an upward trend, but you'll see those two really big peaks that I have sort of highlighted there. The 05-06 is the year that Katrina hit, and then 17-18 was when we had Hurricane Harvey and I think like 5 other major storms that hit. And so understandably, we saw this huge increase in the numbers of students who were McKinney-Vento eligible, who had lost housing and were displaced. But you'll also notice that by the next school year, those numbers had dropped back down, which sort of indicates that we're actually pretty good at rehousing those families that have been displaced by natural disasters. So I just want to, again, like with that context of like, how do we put guardrails around length of time that they have rights to school of origin? Just wanted to provide this as well. I don't know what Vermont's data will look like. We won't know for some time the impact on our data from the flooding of last summer, but this is something that we can look at for the national data. So
Senator Williams has a question.
I have a general question. So who produced this presentation? Is that our Vermont Agency of Education?
Yeah.
Because,
what was the question? Who produces what?
Yeah, who produced this presentation that Senator Williams watched?
That was AOE, Agency of Education.
okay, so because you were questioning whether student would receive transportation, it says they will. Is this in accordance with the bill or the agency policy?
So they will receive transportation if they are McKinney-Vento eligible and they are staying in their school of origin if it is needed. It's not needed in every situation. Sometimes parents can do the driving and don't require any sort of mileage reimbursement, but they have a right to transportation provided by the LEA if they are remaining in their school of origin and they're living in a nearby district. They've had to move.
And there's a process, just to interject, there's a process.
Sorry, Senator Williams has a follow-up.
So if S-171 passes, that's going to be the policy.
That's going to be.
That's our question. That's our question. We don't know. That's one of our concerns, is that it's unclear whether transportation would be a requirement, because 171 has sort of pulled out this part, right? The students who may not be eligible for McKinney-Vento. If they're eligible for McKinney-Vento, absolutely, the transportation right would apply. But if they fall into that, what we anticipate would be a sort of a small category of students who have been displaced but are not homeless, that would be our question, is would there be a requirement for transportation? I don't think it's clear right now.
So what we're trying to understand, Senator, a couple of things. Can we define displacement? What would that look like? What does displacement mean? I think the other question is, who would not be captured under McKinney-Vento that we want to capture and make sure we capture in a fair, fairly, like you, I think what Ms. Preston mentioned, well, somebody just buys a new house. I mean, there are all sorts of things, that prevent certain families from doing certain things, and they're the ones that we want to be able to help with this. So that's what we're gonna try to narrow in on, and frankly, I'm hoping the two of you can help us by coming back and talking to us a little bit and help us basically, I think what Senator Ron Hinsdale would like to do, I'll talk to her about McKinney-Vento, but again, who are we not capturing and who should we capture? It would be helpful. Is that clear? Katie, I see you. Or do you feel as though we captured everybody we need to capture through McKinney-Vento?
McKinney-Vento is pretty expansive,
Okay.
and there are various types of people who are displaced. If they were already, many people who are displaced by natural disasters, the most vulnerable to start with. Like we're talking about, low-lying neighborhoods in Barre, for example, that were vulnerable people to start with. So their opportunities to find replacement housing, either temporarily or permanently, are much harder than, say a person in a more well-off community who had some flood damage, but has the capacity with their insurance and whatever to find other housing. Those most vulnerable are most likely, it's our sense that they're most likely going to end up in precarious housing situations, at least temporarily, which would make them eligible for McKinney-Vento federal supports that would have to be provided by whatever school district they're, in at the moment, geographically located in terms of including rights for a period of time, as Katie spelled out, a duration of time under the law to continue in their school of origin if the parents and the two school districts decide that's the best thing to do for that particular child. So the question is, if people who are less vulnerable to start with, and this was back to Katie's original point about displaced, they had some flood damage, they decide to move temporarily or permanently. Maybe they have to move out of their house for 6 months while it's being, remediated for mold, but their house they're going to intend to move back into, or they end up moving to a different community and deciding to stay in that new community, but they like their old school. We understand the intent here. We don't know. We won't know probably for a long time. The universe, how big the universe of people, the gap between those that would be covered by McKinney-Vento and the total affected population is, and it probably will vary by disaster. I would expect that even between the summer and the December flooding, that there was a different universe of people impacted in terms of their housing. Not every natural disaster is going to be the same, but how big that is and how permanent that is and what their needs are and whether or not they'll be covered by McKinney-Vento is hard to say. So in general, we're supportive of the bill, but as I said, as an agency, we have real concerns about some of the parts that aren't defined yet that could end up putting very large obligations on the new school district that a family ends up in, that have sort of an unlimited duration of time potentially and an unlimited cost duration if you think about transportation. I mean, in the extreme example, if a family from Barre ends up living with, moving to Brattleboro temporarily, what's the obligation? And they want to stay in their school in Barre. Is there an obligation there? I mean, that probably doesn't happen very often, but we have to think through those, or there'll be a lot of, unfortunately, contentious arguments and potentially even litigation going on if those things aren't clarified from the start in the bill.
So would your recommendation be for us to wait this year because more information is going to be coming that would help us make a better decision next year?
I don't know. I don't know that we're going to have the data even by this time next year to really say, affirmatively one way or the other. I mean, I do think, I guess to your earlier question, again, going back to what I think is the intent of this bill is that, natural disasters don't come and knock on your door and ask how much money you have, right?
Right.
I really appreciate the that we're trying to capture a greater number of students and really provide that educational stability, which is, I mean, that's the entire intent of the McKinney-Vento Act, and we know how incredibly important that is. So my concern, I guess, is less with, you know, should we be more expansive with thinking of these students as displaced versus McKinney-Vento, and more with just like, as Anne said, you know, what does that mean? Yes, they have rights to school of origin, but what, for how long? You know, that's a big concern. How long, and what comes with that?
Yeah. Senator Gillick?
Thanks. I think personally, it sounds as though there's enough protection in McKinney-Vento, unless, this is not a question for our agency of ed folks, but maybe for the sponsor of the bill. Is her, and maybe it's in here and I missed it, does she want the students to be able to continue beyond that school year? Because then they wouldn't be covered by McKinney-Vento, so that would be a whole new. It's, I know, but in the bill, does she make that clear? She does? No, she doesn't. Go back. So maybe we should.
I can ask her how long
That'd be
in terms of
great.
time.
I think that would be our recommendation. We didn't see it, maybe we didn't have the most recent version, but we didn't see
This is it.
a duration specified, and we didn't see whether there were any entitlements other than to be able to stay in the school of origin that came with it. Like, did that imply, for example, a similar entitlement to what you get under federal law to transportation? That wasn't specified. And so our major feedback would be that it would be helpful if the bill specified what else besides entitlement to stay in school of origin, and for how long does that entitlement last? And what does it mean to be displaced? I think your example in the beginning, Katie, was really good. If a person has rented a new apartment or new house because their house was damaged and they're waiting for the insurance settlement and all, are they actually homeless? Under McKinney-Vento, they might not be homeless. So what is going to be the definition? You could reference, for example, in this bill, as a matter of state law, you could reference the McKinney-Vento definition under federal law for what it means to be homeless. That's an option. Or, you know, there are various options, but that would be helpful to reference what does it mean to be displaced in a more definitive way. Because not everybody who's displaced necessarily is homeless by any means.
Senator Sheen.
I think that's a perfect segue to the question that I had regarding how we're defining natural disaster and
Mhm.
what, you know, falls into that category. And, you know, if, you know, we're talking about a natural disaster that affects hundreds of people, or if there's a mudslide and it just affects one house, you know, is that person protected under the definition of what a natural disaster would be? So I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think just maybe finding a definition that's, you know, already maybe federal statute could be helpful, just so that we're, you know, some added clarity.
So it sounds to me that the big questions are duration, what does it mean to be displaced, and what does a natural disaster, what's that definition? I'm glad McKinney-Vento is in place. We talk in my household about things that are LP and HP, low priority, high priority. Kind of putting this in the middle, you know, in terms of the session, if we can get these definitions and it's workable, we'll move it, and I'll talk to the sponsor. We've got our work cut out for us with a bunch of other things. Please, Senator Williams.
So I'd like to, for the committee, you know, transportation, if, does that mean that the district's gonna have to send a bus after the child? Number one, or can he take a taxi cab back and forth? If a parent, agrees to let him to transport him, are there any protections for the person that volunteers, insurance wise?
And it's a good question. I think our witnesses have a similar concern, or maybe Senator Gulick raised it, you know, if you're transporting somebody from Burlington to Brattleboro, those kinds of things, you know, by car, reimbursements, bus. So all that can be figured out. Okay.
Yes,
Anything-
the last point that was made, and I'm sorry, I can't see who made it, but the one about about deciding like, whether it's actually a natural disaster, it might be really helpful to consult with, the state emergency management, because not everybody who has some impact on their home currently that you could call a natural disaster, receives any kind of disaster assistance, or even is, defined as a victim of a natural disaster. There are things like whether you live in a county where a disaster was declared and therefore are FEMA eligible. And a lot of the people, sadly, who were affected, for example, in the flooding this summer, actually got no assistance whatsoever because they didn't meet whatever the federal definition was. So you would again want some guardrails around what does it mean to be displaced by a natural disaster, and how, again, that would be a subject to litigation if we don't put the guardrails on up front.
Great.
Um,
And our attorney just arrived, so we can raise these with her and see if she can help us with some definitions.
Perfect.
I'm just surprised that was not considered a natural disaster,
Which
this flooding of the summer.
In Addison,
Right. Wow.
there has to be a definition out there. FEMA must have something.
I did see something on the Department of Homeland Security's website that included a list. I think we could go through that probably and figure something out. And I did do just a very quick search, but it doesn't look like there's a legal obligation to provide transportation for education. I think our general counsel, or ledge counsel. That's what I.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you both.
You're very welcome.
We'll be in touch.
Wonderful.
We're standing by, ready to help.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
You. Take
Thank
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
City James, do you mind joining us? We just had a discussion about S-171. Did you draft it? This is.
I did.
You did. So can you help us find a definition, or maybe we need to create one around displaced, what it means to be displaced and natural disasters? And then we can decide, I think, the duration of how long we would want somebody to be eligible to move from school to school or district to district.
Sure, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. So yes. I'm going to caveat that with. I think there is a strong possibility that there is no universal definition for either of those terms.
Okay.
And so that is something that if you are interested in pursuing this language, I can look for, certainly when it comes to natural disaster, I'm gonna phone a friend in my office.
Okay.
And I can bring you what I found, but my guess is, these are definitions you all are going to need to create for the purpose of this bill. It sounds like I walked in on some testimony that, perhaps the flooding that occurred this summer was not considered a natural disaster for FEMA purposes in certain areas of the state, right? So if I come back to you and says FEMA has a definition of natural disaster, that doesn't really help you, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think when we did the walkthrough, we pointed out there wasn't a lot of specificity there, and so if this is a concept you all wanna take up, we can work on that.
I for one, I think if we can do this, if we can come up with a definition, and that works for everybody, and we can make sure that kids, at least to kick things off, would be allowed to finish their school year. Give definition of display, I think it would be worthwhile pursuing. And I'm gonna ask Senator Rumpensdale, I don't know if she shared with you when it was drafted, if she had a constituent this happened to, I don't remember, does anybody remember the genesis of it
didn't we have some bill from, was it?
last year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chittenden?
It was Chittenden, but I don't think it was natural disaster. I think
No,
it
it
was
wasn't.
related to
Just-
some family
It's a
movement.
different, yeah. Can I posit a suggestion? This may be way out of left field, but if we were to align displaced with homeless, then we would fit in this.
There's already the residency statute already has a provision for the provision of education for homeless students and how those districts are, how home district is calculated. That's already in current law.
That's what I'm saying. So either we could change the word displaced to homeless, or we could somehow align the definition of displaced with homeless for the purposes of this bill, no?
Well, you could, let me pull up the definition of homeless,
Well,
because it may
well,
not,
If it's not, if they have another home.
right,
home-
they may not be a homeless,
Right.
they may not, so, I hear what you're saying. And again, this is all policy for you, right? Is this the student that is in provisional housing, emergency housing? Or is this literally any student who had to move, even if it was from $1 million home to another $1 million home, right?
Right.
So
Right.
those are all policy considerations.
Yeah, I think we need to hear from the sponsor of the bill to get more clarity. That's
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I don't know how we even begin to have people, that's why I think Senator Doolittle, maybe have something with the homeless, well,
Mhm.
it's check somebody's economic background,
so here is the definition of homeless from the statute that the S 171 proposed to amend. A child, so it's a child of, remember, we're talking about kiddos here, right? So we're talking about their families for domicile purposes, for residency purposes. So a child of homeless parents is defined as a child whose parents lack a fixed, regular, and adequate residence, or have a primary nighttime residence in a supervised, publicly or privately operated shelter, etc. There's more information about types of emergency shelters there. So, lack a fixed, regular, and adequate residence. If you are displaced by a natural disaster and your family is able to move in permanently with other family members, or buy a house or find rental somewhere else, I'm not sure that definition would get you the same population. But it comes back to what is the population you are looking to help.
I'll look to the sponsor. In the meantime, it would be great
Yes, I will.
for these definitions. And we can talk about population a little bit more. Anything else? Okay. I feel like this one, if time works out for us. Move it, yeah, wait, but we're done with things. Okay, related to other priorities, literacy. So we've got two literacy bills we're looking at. S303. And these two bills will be combined. We don't combine them, I know the House will, so. Shall. And we have a revised version incorporating the Agency of Education's recommendations in our folders, correct?
Yes,
I know I saw it. Here it is, 1 nope.
should be draft 1.1 of S303, strike all amendments.
No, I saw that. 204. Or I know I saw it.
Yeah, because I've got mine.
There it is. Got it. Thank you. Okay. Please. So this is a combination of the Agency Literacy Bill and Bobby Starr's Dolly World initiative.
Correct.
I don't know if it's Dolly World initiative, but you know what I mean.
Dolly Parton's Imagination Library.
Thank you.
Again, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel, so you all have draft 1.1 of an amendment, strike all amendment to S303. Remember, S303 is your committee bill that combines two separate bills, as your chair just walked you through. The highlighting on here represents agency recommendations,
Which they took us through everybody, maybe.
January 31st. I have some questions that I will just, and I've reached out to AOE and they have my questions.
Great.
But I will throw them out there for you. I don't think any of them are fatal in any way, just wanting to be precise about the language that we're using.
Great.
So you can see there were no suggested changes to the findings section. Section 2, we're talking about continuing education or professional learning for educators in this section. And remember, this bill is proposing to add a section to the professional licensing chapter.
You're in
On-
section 2.
I'm on section 2, yep, mandatory completion of literacy modules. So the first change is a date change. So as introduced, the bill had the target date here of January 1, 2025. AOE is recommending moving that out to 2026. And then AOE has suggested that and the highlighting here, I don't know what happened, but the highlighting is not as helpful as it could be here. But AOE is suggesting inserting the term professionally in front of licensed Vermont educator.
Okay.
The board, the entity that licenses educators in Vermont is the Professional Standards Board for, I want to get this wrong. It's the Standards Board for Professional Educators. So I can see where they're getting that term professionally. My question for AOE is, I haven't been able to find, and maybe it's there and I just haven't found it, but in Title 16, referring to teachers as professionally licensed. So my suggestion, and I've incorporated it here, is that we just refer to the definition from the same chapter.
Okay.
And which means I included the term professionally, because that was AOE's recommendation. I don't think you need that for several reasons. One, we are working within the same chapter that has a specific definition for both teacher and educator, and both of those definitions require licenses by the standards board. So by virtue of this language being plunked into a chapter with a definition already, I don't think you necessarily need to define it here. Now, not everyone is going to be going to the definition section when they're just trying to figure out what their mandatory completion of literacy modules responsibilities are. So my next suggestion would be keeping the language that I've added that is not highlighted, unfortunately, on line 19 as defined in, and then referring to that definition.
19 on page 1 here.
Yes. Okay, see how it says, starting on page 8 or on line 18, it says all professionally licensed Vermont educators, and then on line 19, I added as defined in, and that would reference to the definition. And I think so I don't think you need the term professionally, but that was a recommendation by AOE, and I have not heard their feedback on that, and I am not a subject matter expert in the field, so I would encourage you to hear their rationale on that. The
Could you
other,
let us know when they, yeah, because it might be, you may be interested to get your thoughts after the definition. Senator Williams.
Do all teachers need to be professional licensed reading instructor?
teachers who are employed in public schools need to be licensed by the standards board. And then there are a myriad of endorsements that go along with different subject matters. But approved independent schools and recognized independent schools do not have to employ licensed teachers by the standards board. They can, but it's not a requirement.
Do you know who chairs the standards board?
I don't, but I can certainly look up.
It's okay.
The other question I have out to AOE is, use of the term educator here. So again, we're working in a definition or in a chapter with a definition section. And the term educator, and I will just say, you all write the law. And so even if there is a definition section for a specific chapter, you can always modify that definition for purposes of a specific subchapter or specific section. So by no means is what I'm about to walk through tying your hands in any way. But the term educator in this chapter is defined as any teacher or administrator requiring a license. And then teacher is defined as an individual licensed under this chapter, and the majority of whose employed time in a public school district or SU is assigned to furnish students with direct instructional or other educational services, as defined by rule of the standards board. So I just wanted to make sure that the intent here is to also require administrators to complete these literacy modules. Because by using the term educator as defined in this chapter, you're pulling them in.
Mhm.
If it's not, it would be an open question of whether the definition of teacher that's already in statute covers everyone
Mhm.
who we want to take these modules. And if not, let's just draft our own definition.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Did you write this?
No, not a word. So AOE just wanted us to put it in, so we'll ask them.
I have that, that's an outstanding.
That's
question.
great, yeah, because I do, as I recall, one of the things that this does is it does keep pulling all teachers, right? Physical educator, people that you might not necessarily expect to go through this training. Is that still accurate?
I can't speak to the intent of it, but I can tell you that
Or not the intent, but is that what will happen?
if this language were to pass,
Yeah.
all teachers, which is basically anyone who's licensed by the standards board,
Yeah.
and administrators
Right.
would be pulled in.
Yeah.
So, yes, it would be a broad range of teachers.
Okay. Okay. Great.
So,
We have Ms. Lesh coming in next. I don't know if she can weigh in.
it's up to you,
Yeah.
you all, yep. But there's nothing, so I would say that making sure that that term educator is the correct term to use is a legal issue that we want to flesh out, right? Otherwise, you're gonna be requiring superintendents
Yeah,
and principals to be
yeah,
taking
yeah.
this, and maybe that is what you wanna do.
I'm speaking for myself, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, but maybe somebody else is thinking.
I would wanna hear the rationale behind it from the AOE. I do remember original testimony saying they did want like PE teachers and all teachers to have this, but I don't remember administrators, so.
And then the use of the term professionally, I don't think there's really anything legally wrong with it, but our goal is to always be as clear and succinct in statute as possible, so I'm not so sure that that's required. And then the next proposed suggestion, page 2, we're in the same section here. So all professionally licensed Vermont educators, employed, the other piece I wanted to just point out here. Employed in a Vermont school. I think is a little ambiguous. And I would just ask, it
Where's
may
the
be ambiguous.
What line?
On line 20, page 1.
It's definitely ambiguous.
It could be, so let's see, hold on, let me just.
Well, let me, tell me, I'm missing the chuckle. Tell me why it's so ambiguous. Tell me that it's employee, you don't think it's needed. Is that what you're saying?
No,
think it's-
public or private?
Yeah, I think it needs.
Oh, I
It
see, what you
needs to be
mean.
better
I
defined.
see, I see.
Okay, so then the next change that AOE proposes on page 2, line 1. Is currently the bill as drafted requires AOE to develop and offer the literacy-based instruction.
Yeah.
And this change would allow them to approve literacy-based instruction, so it doesn't require them to develop it themselves. The same change on line 5 there. Newly I highlighted because I changed it, used to be the word new, but I think newly fits better there. Line 5, offered or approved. And then, the current, the bill as passed was requiring completion for newly licensed Vermont educators, within their second year of teaching, and this requires it before the end of their second year. So just being more specific. And then, let's see. Vermont Public and Approved Independent Schools. That employ professionally licensed Vermont educators. I'm sorry about the highlighting. I don't know what's happening here.
Why are you concerned about
Because
highlighting?
it says line 8, professionally licensed should be highlighted, not Vermont educators.
Oh, okay.
So I can't blame it on technology, that had to have been me. But so
Senator
then,
Williams has a question.
So, why is it? You developed and offered or approved by the agency before the end of the educator's second year of teaching. Is there a reason for that?
so that's a policy decision. So the first, subsection A is saying if you're currently licensed, you gotta do it by a certain date.
Right.
And then subsection B is saying, once you come online as a new teacher, within your first 2 years, you have to complete this training. And I'm guessing that ties to a renewal period, a license renewal period.
I remember from testimony that Dan Welch gave last year that about the tenuring. Said in evaluations that if they're not given an adverse evaluation within the end of the second year. Sounds that they can't get rid of it. I thought that's got something to do with it or.
I think this is more around the licensing piece, and I wonder also, if I'm recalling it correctly, there's a lot of provisional licensing that's happening. And I think they're trying to capture some of those folks, but we'll have to talk about whether it should be 2 years or section.
I just think that the first year of teaching is, I mean, it's like a fire hose, and this is really nice to give them a little bit of a buffer to get on board. So I think 2 years is great, elite, I mean, if not more.
And they. Okay, please go ahead.
I think you raise a good point though about the provisionally licensed teachers. I had not thought of that, and I don't know enough about this area to be able to speak authoritatively or confidently on whether just the term licensed sweeps them in. So that's something that I'll follow up on. So we're on page 2, we're talking about, record keeping here in subsection C. So professionally licensed Vermont educators shall collect and maintain a file on, the bill is introduced just contains the word program, and I thought that was potentially confusing, so I added completion of the literacy professional learning required under this section. And then AOE is suggesting adding the last sentence, the agency shall provide a format for record keeping, including use of the state licensing system as appropriate. And then D. I don't know why there's something. Okay, sorry. D is educators shall provide evidence of completion of the literacy professional learning required under this section. Again, replacing the term program with a more specific reference upon the educator's next license renewal. So schools have to keep track of the completion of the program, and then educators have to provide evidence of it when they renew their license. Section 3 is brand new. You can see that highlighting is correct. It is a recommendation by AOE that on or before September 1, 2024, AOE develops and distributes a list of literacy professional learning requirements specific to each licensing endorsement. I have a question out to AOE on whether or not there is a jurisdiction issue here. The standards board has authority to adopt the rules related to licensing requirements. And along with that, I believe comes the, continuing education and renewal requirement. And so with this language, it's requiring AOE to kind of dictate some specific professional learning requirements specific to each licensing endorsement. I have a question out to AOE of what their opinion is on whether or not there's any jurisdictional issues here. Maybe it's a simple fix of just saying the agency makes recommendations to the standards board on that. And maybe they will have a different legal opinion, because they are experts in this area and I am not. But I just wanted to flag that, as a potential piece to delve more into. Let's see. Section 4, we're on page 3, result-oriented program approval. This was a substantial rewrite. You'll see lots of highlighting. This is a substantial rewrite by AOE. The bill is introduced to contemplated transfer of some rulemaking authority related to the results-oriented program approval. And AOE's recommendation is don't do that. Don't transfer the rulemaking authority. That's going to get complicated. And so they've made their changes here are based on that, keeping rulemaking authority with the standards board and requiring AOE to make a series of recommendations. So you'll see it's from the original bill, it's changing from the original bill, it's proposing to put language in your green books. And because this is just a series of recommendations, I've put that in section 1. So on or before July 1, 2025, as introduced, this was January 1, so a little bit of a change there. AOE shall submit recommendations to the Vermont Standards Board for Professional Educators. The bill as introduced was requiring AOE to do this work. So now they're submitting the recommendations. To strengthen educator preparation programs, teaching of evidence-based literacy practices. And then the agency also has to simultaneously communicate those recommendations to educator preparation programs. And then on or before July 1, 2026, the standards board
And
has.
that's all educator preparations programs,
Yeah.
St. Michael, State Colleges, you can have, okay.
Yes. And if you want to, that would be a fine place to add both public and private, but I think that would be. Or we could say located in Vermont, maybe. On or before July 1, 2026, the standards board has to consider the recommendations pursuant to subsection A, and as appropriate, update the rules. And then subsection C, as part of its review under subsection A, AOE is required to make recommendations to the standards board regarding whether an additional mandatory examination is needed to assess candidates for educator licensure skills in math and English language arts fundamentals, as well as candidates' understanding of the importance of evidence-based approaches to literacy and numeracy beyond the requirements that are already in effect. So do there need to be updates? Or is there an additional exam that needs to be required on those two skills? So again, that's a
So we're just throwing it
recommendation.
out there, it would be what they would consider, give themselves.
Yes,
I don't know if Senator Kulik knows this, are there any exams for licensure that you think of?
There
Or
might
kind of
be.
a transcript?
I think there's a practice now. I never had to take it myself, but I think there might be practices.
and that would be helpful. See if that's something that I can answer. That's definitely it. The standards board is not an area that I have had a chance to delve into much. But the rules series, they just updated the rules, I think last year. It is thick, right? It's every endorsement, and all of the licensing requirements that go along with that, so.
So it's a matter of making recommendations, it's not,
Right,
it's not.
not requiring,
So
yeah,
it's like a study.
yeah. They may want it right down the road, do it or not. Which I get, I mean, sometimes when I see exam, it gives me old butterflies and I think,
It's a
you know,
4-letter word.
what's that?
Exam is a 4-letter word.
And, you know, I want somebody who's just this gifted, amazing teacher to get closed out because they get exam anxiety, but I probably thinking that.
One thing I will just throw out is if you all are interested in what these recommendations are, you could add or, that they also just share those recommendations with general assembly.
Oh, yeah, that would be great. That would be great. That would be good.
And that's it for the recommended changes. There were no other changes. I'm not sure if I asked, like, stuff on Jet, of course.
this is AOE's edits of their own language, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, is that what you were asking me before?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely their edits of their.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so they gave us something, they said, did you get this started? I said, yes, and then they came back with these edits. And, we were supposed to hear from Dolly World yesterday, so we're rescheduling them. We have Senator Cheryl Hooker and a couple other former legislators, I think, coming up next week to talk about how this, maybe you said it also, Senator, this is in your district. Have thousands and thousands of votes. So anyhow, we'll talk a little bit about that, please.
Both my daughter and I would like to know if Dolly Parton is going to be
No.
in attendance.
Well, the only thing is,
If you told me
She
I had
might.
to pass.
there's the possibility if we pass it, then that opens up.
Just wanted to have the crew.
Yeah,
Amazing.
that would be amazing.
Can we go back to page one? If we're gonna require that new teachers get this training within 2 years. Is AOE gonna give them a stipend or help them to get the certification if they don't already have it?
It's a great question.
And if they don't already have it, should we go to the Vermont State Colleges system that teach teachers, tell them we want them to teach reading?
You're hitting on a couple of great points. Senator Jewett raised the question of the state colleges updating their teaching of literacy, and I believe we might even have state colleges here, and I know you're working on that to get Senator Jewett a more comprehensive response. So that kind of touches on your question, but then in terms of cost, great question. We'll hear from Ms. Lesh next. I think it's free, I don't
I
remember.
think these are the literacy
They are.
modules from Act 28.
Yeah.
Which have already been paid for, I believe, through Act 28. I believe.
Yeah, no, I,
Check on
You're
that.
right.
99% sure, yes.
Was your question getting to if they have to do the modules outside of work, like they're at home or something? Is that?
Oh. That's another, because it is 46 hours, or I think we heard these modules, and we're gonna get a sample just so we understand them a little better from Ms. Lesh. Is Ms. Lesh coming in?
She's coming via Zoom, right?
I would encourage you
Yeah.
to flesh this out fully, so you all are comfortable with the decisions you're making. Oftentimes licensure renewal requirements come with a series of continuing education, professional development requirements, right? You cannot renew your license without a certain amount of hours, credits, subject matters. So one question would be, does this module check enough boxes, or is it an additional on top of what would be required for a license? So this may be not necessarily more than what is also already required,
Yeah,
potentially.
I would vote for this to not be on top of what's already required. I think this could be in lieu of, just like, whatever, 3 credit course or.
Right, you're using specifically literacy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
but
otherwise.
if you're
it
a
would be-
history teacher, foreign language teacher, you could be doing holistic history, this and something related to history.
Right, but I don't think you should have to do all of your history credentials plus this. I think there's gotta be a way to, it's just too much.
Well, yeah, we're talking about brand new teachers within the second year. So,
No.
no,
No,
so I'm talking about the bottom of page 1. That new teachers.
the bottom, so subsection A and section 2 is for, once this bill passes, let's say this bill passes on, or is signed into law on July, or takes effect on July 1, 2020. On July 1, 2024, everyone who's licensed by the Professional Standards Board has to do complete this module on or before January 1, 2026. Subsection B on page 2 is saying on July 1, 2024, let's say you get your license on July 2, 2024. You've got to complete this module before the end of your second year of teaching. And I would encourage you to ask whether that lines up with a renewal timeline And therefore, they would be required to be completing a certain amount of professional development anyway. So this is not actually a new timeline, it's just the subject matter. This is all, I'm just positing. And the other thing I would suggest we get clarity on is, what does the professional learning requirements look like for the individual, like for endorsement? Is it endorsement specific, or is it like for lawyers? There is no requirement that I have any sort of education around legislative lawyering, right? It is just a certain amount of hours I have to do every 2-year renewal cycle. So,
Change that.
I'd be happy for the help if you can find someone who wants to give some workshops on legislative lawyering.
No, you don't need it. Yes, there you go, yeah.
I would just say, instead of like guessing and, that we have someone from the endorsement world
Great.
come in and just explain how the whole thing works to us, then we can make an informed decision.
And this bill and Senator Bulick's are full HPs, high priorities, so. So, yeah,
May I ask a question about the rest of the bill?
you bet, please.
The Dolly Parton's Imagination Library folk, do you have any idea if they would be recommending changes to the bill? Should I be in the room for their testimony?
It'd be great if you could at
Okay.
least zoom in,
Yeah.
or if you just want to watch it later, whatever works.
Great.
I think they're all enthusiastic. I think the people we need to have in are, see if, are the V's, see if everybody's okay with it, that kind of thing. Make sure that administratively it will work. Yeah,
Great.
Wonderful, thanks.
thank you so much. And Ms. Lesh,
Did you mention that these two bills, the Tennessee London 303 and 204?
yeah, 204 and 303, I think we will somehow blend.
We're gonna squish them together. Yeah, I know, it's not gonna get the glory, but
Oh, you are?
no.
Oh, no, you're totally fine with Laura.
Your glory, yes.
No, you'll.
I would not call that glory. I would not call that.
No,
glory.
it's this fact, I think, I renamed the bill 4 years.
You, LaRock, you with literacy bill.
Ms. Lesh, nice to see you. You were muted.
There we go. Hi, great to see you all.
Great to see you. We've talked about these modules for a long time. We passed it in 2 or 3 years ago. And I know that in creating, we've just been talking about them. We'd love to know what they look like, what they feel like. Give us a sense. So when we're talking to teachers, constituents, we can sort of say, hey, yeah, we've seen these, and this is the kind of work that teachers will be doing.
Great. Well, I'm happy to give you a walkthrough today.
Thank you.
I do have some slides that we sent over. They were late coming in.
We have
I can
not,
share.
we have not seen them.
They were late.
Okay.
There.
Apologies for the
We still
delay.
don't have them. So, yeah,
You don't? Okay. Well, I can forward them now, and I can also share my screen. Is that easiest?
Probably, yeah.
yeah, that'd be great. Share the screen and forward them to Morgan, please.
Okay, great. I will do that. Let's see. I will forward them really quickly. And so what I'm thinking as I'm forwarding them, apologies, I'm not looking at you as I'm navigating
No problem, no problem.
the screen. But so what I was planning to do is to just walk through a broad overview to provide a little background and context on the modules and some screenshots that walk through a variety of the features of the modules, but then also can just get into the modules. I'm also happy to just get into the modules if you prefer, if you have a preference.
We have
You
about.
can tell me now or also just stop me in the middle.
We have 25 minutes, so whatever your preference is.
Okay, great. Let's see. I will just start with the slideshow and sharing my screen here.
Yeah, she's a literacy person.
Yeah, great. Can you all see the slides?
Yeah,
And
Okay, great, perfect. So Yes, I'm Emily Lesh, and I am the Act 28 project manager, and Act 28 focuses on improving literacy outcomes. So I have been with the agency focused on literacy for just over a year and a half or so, and I work in the Student Pathways Division, where Jess DeCarolis is the division director. And then I also will say, in preparing these slides, I really work closely with Emily Loita, the other Emily L., who is a content area specialist in ELA in the Student Pathways Division as well. So did the slide just advance for you?
Yes.
Okay, so this background, and you teed this up well, happy to skip over this, but the literacy modules are a result of Act 28 that was passed in 2021. It directed funding and ESSER funding specifically to the AOE to create these literacy modules, as well as creating the position in the Agency of Education, which is my position, as well as the Act 28 Advisory Council. So the modules, though, are a critical piece of Act 28. And so the legislation really specifically named that the AOE would provide professional development learning modules for teachers and the 5 key areas of literacy instruction, so phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and reading comprehension. So in order to do this, the AOE issued an RFP, a request for proposals, which is the fair and competitive bid process, and then entered into a contract with Public Consulting Group, who has created the modules that I'm going to walk you through today. So just some high level about the modules, and I know we have touched on these in other testimony, some of these high level facts, but just wanted to provide this context and kind of set the groundwork before getting into the details. So the module series, the course series, is titled Building a Strong Foundation for Lifelong Literacy Success, and it was launched in September of this year. It's available online and accessible to educators across the state. And it's asynchronous. So it's providing online learning opportunities with check-ins for learning throughout each module. So there are a total of 6 modules, and the modules, we're using this term, but it's essentially a course for both K through 3 educators and then also 4 through 12 educators. But the content in 4 through 12 is also very relevant for CTE and adult education and learning educators as well. So each one of those modules takes about 6 to 8 hours to complete. And so in total, because we have a course for K through 12, and then we also have a course for for K through 3, and then also a course for 4 through 12. There's a total of almost 85 hours of content available through these modules. And after completing each of the 6 modules within a grade band, there is a certificate for completion available at the end of each module that educators can use for relicensure and so forth. The modules are housed on the Vermont Learning Management System, the new Vermont Learning Management System, which is Pepper, which also was a result of this contract. Okay, so that's the background and context. Any questions on that before I dig into the content and providing the walkthrough?
Yeah.
Actually, I do. Thank you, Emily. Now I'm even a little more confused. So,
Okay.
Is last September, we've got a brand new set of modules, and I'm a little confused on the legislative intent then on I guess it would be 303 specifically. Can you help me out? What is 303 developing that wasn't developed in September of last year?
So currently, the modules are available on a voluntary, so they're available for all
That's helpful.
educators to take. And it's a new resource or sort of tool in the toolkit for educators to learn about the foundations of literacy.
Thank you.
So I'll dive into the content unless there are further questions.
Yeah.
About that background. Okay. So overall, the modules provide an understanding of how the brain learns to read, and then a deep dive into the 5 key areas of literacy development and instruction. So really looking specifically at phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and reading comprehension. And so those 5 areas, the 5 key areas of literacy development, were identified in the National Reading Panel in the 90s. And then also Act 28 really noted that that's specifically what the modules should do. And so within each of these modules, the course walks through each of these 5 components, provides research and the evidence base for each component, also provides evidence-based literacy practices that are applicable in the classroom, and then also draws connections to assessments for each of these key areas of literacy development. So here's a broad overview of the content, each of the 6 modules. So module 1 is really applicable for all educators, and it's titled Understanding the Neuroscience of Literacy. And it really provides the 101 or primer on how the brain learns to read. And so this is very applicable broadly for all educators, no matter the grade band or content area. And then after the first module, you'll see that there are 5 distinct modules and courses depending on the grade band that you teach. So for K through 3, exploring language and phonology, understanding phonics and word study, creating fluent readers.
Senator Hewlett has a recommendation.
Okay,
Sorry.
great.
Emily, I was just gonna say, you don't need to read every word on the slide.
Okay.
Fine,
Great.
yeah, I mean, at least for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. And I think we'd love to get to see what these, really look like.
Great. Okay, and tell me if you'd prefer me to just get into the learning management system. I have that pulled up as well.
I mean, I just love to see, frankly, show us a module.
Okay, great.
Those
So
are teachers are gonna be looking at.
yeah, so this is a screenshot of what users will look at, and and each module is based on these these 3 conceptual models: the simple view of reading, the reading rope, and the active view of reading. And these are screenshots from the module itself. And would you prefer that I just get into Pepper and provide you with that walkthrough?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, can you hit play on something so we could just watch one? I mean, that's what we really just love to see.
Yeah.
What are teachers gonna be seeing? That'd be cool.
Yeah, great. And do I have volume? Will you hear and with the
Yeah.
live? Okay,
I think
great.
good.
Okay, excellent. So, all right, no, you're not. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yep,
Mhm.
perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is So I'll walk into this is the home screen here for the course when you log in to the module, the modules. So this is the first module, which is focused on understanding the neuroscience of literacy. And so in each module, there is a combination of reading and also audio that goes along, but then there also are activities embedded throughout each module. So this is the broad overview. We walk through what is the science of reading, what the research says about reading, the science of learning to read.
Can we hear the voice?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so here is one activity. And tell me if you...
We don't hear it yet.
You don't? Okay, then let's see. What do I need to do to share my audio? Share sound. Okay.
Foundational skills you first developed as an early reader.
Do you hear it now?
You're good at using these skills because you've been practicing for years, and you draw on your foundational skills with automaticity and ease. This is what you want for your students too, and that's.
So that's one. There's this check for did you want to listen to the rest of that?
I'm looking to the committee. No, I think I mean, you have one that sort of says, hey, this is what this is how you teach reading. Anything kind of close to that?
So it does. So it walks through. Yeah. So, I guess the answer to that is that it walks. So this is the first part that really gets into how the brain learns to read and provides a background and understanding of like what the science of reading is.
Right.
This walks you through. So there's three main so this walks you through the simple view of reading that it talks about how.
Let's begin by discussing the simplicity of the simple view of reading, originally proposed in 1986 by Gull and
let's
Tummer.
listen to this for a minute, okay, Emily?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Gull and Tummer, where they proposed that reading was the product of two broad skills: the ability to read the words off the page and the ability to understand the oral language in which the material was written. Both of these skills together were necessary for skilled reading comprehension. Neither alone could result in skilled reading. Simply stated, decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. This is an equation D multiplied by LC equals RC, and because it is an equation, it reminds us that reading comprehension is the product of decoding and language comprehension, and neither skill alone can result in skilled reading. Word reading involves decoding to enable access to word meaning. Decoding includes letter recognition, phoneme to Grokking connections, word pronunciation, and word recognition. Language comprehension involves constructing sentence and discourse level meaning from the individual word meanings we read and our background knowledge. Reading comprehension is the product of decoding and language comprehension. We read to understand. This is the goal of a skilled reader. This idea is usually presented as a mathematical formula. D multiplied by LC equals RC. What is reading? Watch the following video to gain a better understanding of the simple view. When you are done, click Next to move on.
Would you like to watch this video as well a bit, or?
So a few minutes, a couple of seconds, yeah, a little bit of it.
Okay.
See.
I can try to make it.
So a common way to think about reading is that it is the product of decoding and language comprehension. So decoding is one's ability to apply the alphabetic principle to crack the code that hides words behind letters and sounds. On the other hand, language comprehension is your vocabulary skill, your grammar skill, your ability to comprehend complex narratives as they unfold over time. And so we view reading as the product of both of those things, one's ability to crack the code or decode, and one's ability to comprehend language. So if we view reading as the product of decoding and language comprehension, you could think of a circumstance in which a child has weak skills in either one of those dimensions. For instance, a child could be a weak decoder. And if you're a weak decoder, and yet you have good language comprehension, if reading is the product of decoding and language comprehension, the child would still be a poor reader. And the converse is also true. If you have a child who has very good decoding skills but very poor language comprehension, based on the simple view of reading, we would view them as not being a good reader. So if we view a skilled reader as having skills in both decoding and language comprehension, what we want to do is backtrack into the preschool years and think about how we can build those skills that are forerunners or precursors to future decoding and language comprehension success. Skills like print knowledge, phonological awareness, vocabulary, those are considered precursory skills to future decoding and language comprehension ability.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
thanks.
you're welcome. And then
So-
there's similar content for Scarborough's rope, which is a bit more complex model.
Okay,
And
the
then
woman
also
on the right, the woman on the right isn't the one that was just on the front page of the New York Times for not teaching kids properly how to read, correct?
No,
Good, okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm not sure which one you're referring to, though.
Yeah,
Oh,
But-
wow.
we'll make sure.
Uh,
So 46 hours of this, right?
So for 46 hours for K through 3 educators, and then 46 hours for 4 through 12. And each module, so this is so these 6 lessons are in one module. So this course or module that provides this overview about what the science of reading is, the research behind the science of reading is it's just over 6 hours.
Okay.
And then at the end of each of these lessons, there is this check for understanding for that
Oh,
educators complete.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
and that's at the end, there's one at the end
Senator
of each.
Weeks has a question.
I can wait.
Yeah,
wait.
please.
Jump in.
Okay, so maybe an hour ago or so, we were talking about whether this requirement would apply to administrators. And you just split between, I can't remember what, one group of, younger kids, one group of older kids, different.
Mhm.
So I get that. But what's your thought about the administrators having, being required to also take these modules?
So that's a great question. I would say that there is, and I would also, so with these modules, I think there is some content that's important for awareness among all administrators, all building leaders, all educators. But then there also are certain educators, especially in the early foundational years where foundational skills are really critical, that a more in-depth knowledge is really critical for the success of each student. And so with reference to your specific question, I realize I didn't answer it head on, but that's what I would say. And then we can also talk with Interim Secretary Boucher to provide greater clarification.
Okay, so potentially in S303, Section 3, this would be where AOE goes in, looks at the modules, determines which ones might be appropriate to which level, and that's the conversation. Okay.
Yep,
Thank you.
Yep. yes, of course.
Great.
Yeah.
Uh,
There also are, I didn't click, there are interactive activities throughout. We didn't get to one of those, but there are activities throughout them as well. I just wanted to note that.
for me, it was just really helpful seeing this. I know we made a big investment with ARPA funds to create this. A lot of committee time, a lot of discussion. I just want to see the product and what would be in front of teachers. Yes, in a week.
Emily, is Pepper Vermont specific, or is it an off-the-shelf tailored to Vermont, et cetera?
It is, so we have contracted with Public Consulting Group, who is providing us with the Pepper platform. And it's not, they have customized it for Vermont, but it is a learning management system or platform that is used in other states as well. So Colorado and Connecticut have similar learning modules, and this is a turnkey solution, but customized for Vermont.
Okay, and then just out of curiosity, you know, between the different states, would you say, you know, this is like a 50% customization for Vermont, or is this just kind of minor tweaks to make it look regional?
Ooh, that's a good question, and it's hard to put a percentage on it. I can tell you that we received the content, the Vermont team has received the content, and Emily Loita and I have carefully reviewed, as well as a team of other folks internal within the Agency of Education, have reviewed all of the content before it goes live. But most importantly, we've also been able to integrate some of the policy guidance that's really relevant to Vermont and other contexts that's relevant to Vermont throughout.
Thank you.
Senator Hashim stepped out when you showed the last two videos. Can you show them again?
I didn't step out because I didn't want to watch it. I went to the bathroom.
I know, that was
Friday
good.
afternoon, you might want to grab a bag of popcorn and watch them again.
Right. Very helpful. I think this is going to connect well with 204 and 303, and we'll throw in the Valley World in there too.
Yes, I
Thank you
do. As
so
we
much.
get, yeah, you're,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, please.
It's hard to see and read the room virtually, as you know. I was just going to say, as it connects to 204, I did want to draw out as we get into the other. So here we are. This is exploring language and phonology, which is the second module. But so assessing, there are specific lessons on assessing each of the 5 key areas of literacy. So I just wanted to, this is the overview, the assessment cycle.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that connection point, and that there is professional learning that we could direct educators to relevant to
204.
screening and assessment in 204.
Beautiful.
Thanks, sir. So, Emily, if these bills go forward, these modules become a requirement, is something else going away? Like, were there modules now which fade into history and this replaces them, or are we putting this on top of something else?
So these, Senator Weeks, you're asking if these modules will go away and be replaced by something else?
No. So we're introducing a new set of modules. We're introducing potentially a requirement that they be, administered with different periodicities, given whether you're a current teacher or a new teacher. But I assume that there is some type of literacy modules that exist now. I mean, we have a reading. We've been reading for hundreds of years, and we've had an education system that required proficiencies of this nature or that nature. That's why there's continuing education or professional development, et cetera. Are we, in addition to introducing these models, are we getting rid of something else? Are we replacing something else that?
we are not, so my understanding of 303 and is that these would be the modules that we would be utilizing for professional learning for
Okay.
educators across the state.
I get that bit, but is it replacing something else that then?
So I might be able to help.
Please.
When we did Act 28, which these came out of, we found teachers didn't know how to do this. They came and said, we don't know how to teach reading, right? To be perfectly honest, we had fifth grader teachers at the end of the. And so, and we also were looking at reading scores. And so this is what came out of them. Prior to that, I think a combination of things. The shortest way I could explain it, reading wars were going on. Some people were learning the wrong way, some people weren't learning. And now we've settled on this science of reading as a way to address and fix a major problem in this country.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
There's not a group of naysayers that say this is the wrong direction.
No, we
Because we do
took,
go down paths, paths are sometimes successful, sometimes. they're
right,
not.
yeah.
Is there a group that says, wrong science, again, I don't wanna, put full weight of our efforts and treasury behind it, a program that doesn't have
Yeah.
the design. That's all.
Yeah, I know, when we took a lot of testimony on this was probably 3 years ago. Took, I think, $2.5 million in ARPA funds, and this is the product of it. And now we're getting centrifugal spill and then moving it into the requirement. And yeah, we have not heard, I mean, we're hearing a little bit of stuff on 204, but I don't think anything major. So this is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I wondered about that woman in the photo. Great, not you. All right, thank you. This has been so helpful.
You're welcome.
And if you're interested, Ms. Lesh, we're jumping into 204 if you just want to hang out, but I can't imagine you do. But if you want to even hang out off screen and just listen in, you're welcome to do so.
Absolutely. Yes, I will do that. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I'll just say in summary, the modules, they provide this common starting point for all educators across Vermont. And then we also know with professional learning, additional opportunities for practice, and for educators applying this information in the classroom. There are great opportunities for looking forward in that way as well. But this provides a great starting point.
Thank you. And we're so grateful you're with us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate the opportunity.
yeah. Send Ms. Lesh one of our favorite fruit baskets. So thank you. You can take us off. 3-minute quick
I'm
break.
pretty sure that's
Yeah.